I would like to welcome everyone joining us in person this evening, as well as those who are viewing remotely. The board held an executive session prior to this meeting regarding legal matters. Board members, with the agenda before you, are there any changes? All right, I would now like to call on the board secretary for a roll call of board members.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Dr. Crevecore. Dr. Crevecore? She's on.
She's on.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
She unmuted for a second. Carlene, we can't hear you.
I know she's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dr. Duffy.
Oh.
Is Carlene, are you there? Okay. Ms. Huff.
Here.
Mr. Leos?
Here.
Ms. Sidney? She's,
There's 5 of us here.
she's on. Yeah.
In separate rooms. All right, I sent her a text. All right, we'll work on those technical issues during communications.
Get the speakerphone now.
We could get the speakerphone. There's one right here.
Tech.
Okay. All right, so while we work on that, we'll go ahead with communications. Mr. Johnson will now provide us with a superintendent update.
All right, I would like to provide with you with an update of the district comprehensive plan process. Last Wednesday, the planning committee finished its third session with another half day of insightful discussions and feedback. Thank you all for participating, the stakeholders, for their time and ideas. Moving forward, we will finalize our new district vision, mission, and value statements, draw on input to revise the current plan's goals, and complete a new 3-year comprehensive plan to submit to the board for approval and then the Pennsylvania Department of Education by next March. So thanks everyone for participating.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. I don't believe we have any student items at this time, but I will call on Ms. Chayla Ramirez Crawford for anything you might want to add. We're so glad to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Unfortunately, I was out for 2 weeks due to some medical issues, but fall is beginning. The leaves are beautiful outside, and I do know that the marking period is ending around sometime next week, and that the PSATs are on Wednesday, so everyone's kind of prepping themselves and their brains for that coming up. I think everyone's trying to get everything together for the end of the marking period, but things are good.
All right, well, good luck to all the students in the end of the marking period. Thank you so much, Jayla. All right, I do have a few legislative updates to provide. The legislature, the Pennsylvania State Legislature, has been in session, but so far has not passed any of the code bills that would finalize the last details of the state budget. There are still many discussions happening around vouchers at the in the state capitol. Although the governor line item vetoed them out of the state budget for this year, some legislators are seeking to find a compromise on passing the code bills that would also ensure the creation of a voucher program. PSBA is strongly opposed to this move, as am I. The Basic Education Fund Commission is charged with reviewing the distribution of state funding for basic education to Pennsylvania's 500 school districts and providing a report of its findings to the General Assembly. So far, this commission has held 8 hearings across the state and has heard from expert and school administrators from various parts of the Commonwealth. There will be 2 more hearings. One will be in Enola on November 2nd, and one will be in Bedford on November 7th. The public is encouraged to submit any comments on the distribution of state funding to the Basic Education Funding Commission website, which perhaps unsurprisingly is basiceducationfundingcommission.com, all one word. So if you'd like to submit some comments to the state legislature about funding across the state of Pennsylvania for public education, you can do so there. That's all I have for legislative update. Gretchen and Peter, do you have any updates from the COG?
I have one, and then I'll pass it to Peter. There was a search for an assistant director for Center Region Parks and Rec, and an offer was made after many interviews, and that offer was declined very sadly. So now they are once again looking to fill that role, and Christy Owens is doing a great job as director, but she needs some help, and they're working on that, and I'll pass it to Peter now.
Yeah, thank you. Last Friday, Randy Brown, Jason Grotini, and Greg Shively from Green Sky and I had a meeting with one of the founders for Prospect 14, the solar developer, with whom we've been engaging. We impressed upon him that we want responsiveness and speed. That was conveyed by all parties, and I believe it was heard. So that's really all I have on. Yes, very, very good. So they also have taken more interest in the price of our retainer and the work for our lawyers. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but the optimist in me wants to believe that they would like to pay for even more of that. But that may not happen. That's just what I hope for. Okay.
Thank you for your optimism. All right. At this time, we'll move on to public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes for action items. Public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by the Sunshine Act. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. As a reminder, public comment is a chance for community members to share their thoughts with the board. It's not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversation. You can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. Is there anyone here in person who would like to make a public comment this evening? All right, if you'd like to come to the podium and state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Lynette Brooks. I live in Ferguson Township, and I am currently in a Title IX lawsuit about last season's hockey teams. But today I'm speaking about current retaliation and a new Title IX violation happening during this ice hockey season. At the program meeting on September 5th, the ice hockey club's varsity coach announced that any player on JV who showed appropriate skills by December 31st would have an opportunity to play with varsity. This is an educational opportunity under Title IX. This opportunity applied to everyone except 2 female athletes rostered to JV due to an official district policy created by the Title IX coordinator, school solicitor, and assistant athletic director. That prohibits the girls from being on the ice with 3 boys who are cross-rostered to both the JV and varsity teams. It is our understanding that current Registrar Ebeck, varsity assistant coach Stidson, and former VP Coffey of the Booster Club lied to Lauren Crispell about an email written by the girls' parents threatening to sue them if their boys hurt our girls during practice. These lies are the basis of the official policy enacted by SCASDA as demanded by the aforementioned parents as a pretext to move the 3 boys up to solely varsity practices and thereby keep them off the ice with the girls as retaliation for the previous Title IX complaint. The girls are prohibited from ever moving up to varsity by the SCASDA ban that excludes them from being in practices with the 3 boys who attend only varsity practices. Not being able to practice with the varsity team means that you cannot play with the varsity team. This excludes the girls from an educational opportunity for the entirety of their educational career, as the boys and girls are in the same grade. Lauren Crispell repeated these lies to the ice hockey head coaches when explaining the ban. Even though they could not produce an email that contained the lies, when Linda Pierce, Lauren Crispell, and Scott Etter met with Aaron Brooks, they refused to publicly retract the lies they had spread. The Title IX coordinator blamed the girls for the situation and said that had the girls not filed their Title IX complaint, the exclusionary policies would not have been enacted. This is slander and retaliation. Due to the current lack of a JV coach, the majority of the team is practicing with varsity, but the girls must practice with the middle school team because of the ban. JV hockey includes checking, but middle school hockey does not, which puts the girls at greater risk of injury during games due to a lack of adequate practices. Giving the girls inadequate preparation for games is not only a safety concern, it is a form of retaliation for their Title IX complaint.
That's 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else here publicly who'd like to make a comment? Please, if you come to the podium and state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Michael Beek. It's spelled B as in boy, I-E-K. I'm here. First of all, I want to thank SCASDA, the teachers, especially special ed teachers, support staff, the administration, the facilities people, everyone, and you folks. This is a tremendous amount of work. I can't even conceive of what it takes to run this organization, and I'm grateful for it. I'm proud parent of 3 SCASDA graduates, starting with walking to Coral Street. I love this district, been here 30 years. My children, my daughter is SCASDA, Penn State, Peace Corps, Penn State MBA, work for the Defense Department, Health and Human Services, and is now a diplomat with the State Department helping run the embassy in Monrovia, Liberia. All right. The goal of the entire State Department is spreading American values. I'm tremendously proud. My middle child, my first son, is supporting his partner while she completes her PhD in occupational therapy. My youngest, some of you I know have run into, Matthew, is at Slippery Rock in the Rock Life program, where kids have an opportunity kids with autism, intellectual disabilities, go to classes and things like they do through LifeLink, a tremendous program, but get to live in the dorms and be independent. And SCASDA prepared him for that. So I'm here, and I've written this down because I get riled up, I'm here to register my strong disagreement with and opposition to those who want to interfere with teachers and librarians doing what they do, and with kids being allowed able to read whatever they want, to whatever they choose, whether in school or not. The people I'm talking about say, oh, we're not book banners, but they're on the side of the book banners, all right? That side has never been right in history, okay? They're just not. Sheriff in Idaho is checking out books he doesn't like and paying the fines forever to keep them away from children. All right, so I'm going to speed this up. What's wrong with these people, all right? What are you so afraid of? Why would it be a problem for your child to come to different conclusions about life than you might have? What are you so afraid of? These folks are obsessed with people's genitals and what they're doing with them. They literally, in writing, say, people in groups who advocate for the sexualization of children through curriculum. That doesn't exist. It's a fake argument made up to argue against. Reading about different perspectives helps people, helps kids. It saves lives. I'm going to skip ahead. People should absolutely restrict whatever they want their kids to read. They have no right to restrict mine or anybody else's. The gall, the lack of humility, it's foul, it's obscene. The only reason I'm here in person instead of writing a snotty letter to the editor like I usually would do is because it matters. These people are running for school board. This is how they start. They take crap over, and I'm losing my thread
That's
because
3
I'm out of
minutes.
time.
Mr.
It's
Beal, that's 3
important,
minutes.
And I'm riled. Thank you all for not letting us become one of these places where everybody has to leave because, I'm done.
All right, thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else here who would like, yes, if you'd please come to the podium and you can share your name for the record. Then you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Brooks. I'm a resident of Ferguson Township, and I'm going to tag off of what my wife started. At the end of August, Steve Miska was appointed as the head coach of the JV hockey team. SCASA's ADD explained to Coach Miska that SCASA had enacted a policy to segregate the 3 boys from 2 girls. This was because the assistant varsity coach and 2 other parents threatened to pull their sons from the program if their boys had to practice with the girls. Coach Miska resigned in protest partially over the JV practice squad would have too few players to have viable practices. Miska eventually agreed to return to coach. However, he found it difficult to find assistant coaches. Having previously coached with me, Miska asked me to coach. SCASA's ADD had already interviewed me as a JV coach and said I was well credentialed and knew I was still interested in being an assistant coach, so I said yes. I immediately contacted SCASA to confirm that all I needed to sign was the current year's policy and that my clearances were still valid. SCASA's VIPS coordinator stated, quote, "You are correct. Your previous clearances are still valid. You have been cleared to volunteer and your name has been added to the database that all SCASA faculty and staff can view," unquote. I brought my USA Hockey number to the first practice to submit to the team manager for easy verification of my USA Hockey clearances. I did not see the team manager that morning, but I knew he would be able to verify everything online. The practice had only 7 players due to SCASA's segregation policy, but Coach Miska and I did the best we could under the circumstances. Immediately after getting off the ice, assistant varsity coach Gary Stitson started berating Coach Miska for allowing me to be a JV coach. Soon afterwards, an emergency meeting was held between SCASA and the hockey club board, occurring as retaliation for me being on the staff. They decided to summarily terminate Miska and myself for the non-existent violation of me not being rostered to the JV team yet. To my understanding, this decision was supposedly driven by the Title IX coordinator, school solicitor, and an assistant athletic director. No meaningful investigation was conducted. It is not only unlawful to retaliate against Title IX complainants, but it is also unlawful to retaliate against individuals who are assisting them. This also left the team without any coaches. So the girls were sent to practice with the middle school team because the girls were prohibited from practicing with the varsity team. Ironically, neither of the middle school coaches were rostered to the JV team, and at least one of them had not produced their USA Hockey clearances. SCASA has repeatedly allowed 3 self-interested parents who have made discriminatory decisions and who preferentially rostered OLV students over SCASA students to the hockey team last year to continue to hold positions of power and influence adversely affecting SCASA students. The Title IX coordinator, who has repeatedly blamed the victims for everything that has happened, is happy to join them in their endeavors. As a taxpayer, I would like to know how much public funds the district is going to waste enabling these bad decisions, because we are not going to go away just because SCASA administration is trying to bully us into submission. Coach Miska asked me to say that he would like to be here tonight, but he's waiting for the USA Hockey investigation to be completed before he comments publicly himself. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else here tonight who would like to make a public comment in person? Great. If you'd like to come to the podium and state your name for the record, please.
Okay, you ready?
Ready.
Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Meg Applenout. I live in Ferguson Township, and I'm a plaintiff in this federal lawsuit against the district and its ice hockey teams for violating my daughter's Title IX rights more than a year and a half ago. You're probably sick of seeing me in these meetings. I'm certainly sick of attending them, but I'm failing to make some sort of impact on this district's board of directors, its human resources and Title IX coordinator, its solicitor, and its athletic department. No one seems to care that our girls are still being discriminated against, and now these adults and those they represent are retaliating against our girls. You see, a group of 3 ice hockey families have informed the district that our girls are never to set foot on the ice with their boys, and SCASA has allowed this to happen. Our girls, even though they made the JV hockey team this year, have been on the ice just once. And that was before SCASA enabled these 3 families to dictate who can and who cannot have access to this educational opportunity that includes ice hockey instruction in a checking environment. Instead, the 2 girls have been told to attend the non-checking middle school practices with kids in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. My daughter isn't getting the level of training she needs to be successful as a 9th grader or to be safe on the ice in a highly physical game, no matter how swole she gets in the gym, because she's really into that. Keep in mind, this isn't about skill level. The girls actually made the JV team. Instead, it's about personal grudges, retaliation, and blocking girls from the educational opportunities available to their male peers, one of whom is a family member of one of our elected school board members. My daughter has grown up on the same ice with these same boys, playing the same game and having some of the same coaches over the years, and yet this district doesn't seem to recognize that. So now, with my smidgen of remaining time, I want to show you something. This is a picture. Can you see it? All right. This is a picture of my daughter Quinn in first grade getting fitted for her first real pair of hockey skates. Little did we know that 7 and 8 years later, leaders of her school district would put so much effort, so many financial resources, including legal fees, so much energy into keeping her off the ice simply because she's a girl, and that they'd let a group of parents get carried away with their misogyny, promoting this toxic masculinity that really shouldn't be welcome in scholastic athletics. My daughter's now 15. She's in 9th grade. She takes AP and advanced classes at State High. She's had a perfect 4.0 all her life. She does lighting for stage productions, participates in Center County's Camp Cadet each summer, and she just wants to get back on the ice. Here she is. Oddly enough, she still wants to play for State High, regardless of how badly the folks in this very room have treated her and allowed the IHC, that's Ice Hockey Club, parents to treat her. I ask you, please remove these defendant hockey parents in leadership positions and just let these girls play. That's all they want to do.
That's 3 minutes.
Okay,
Thank you for your comment. Excuse me. Is there anyone else here in person who would like to make a comment tonight? All right. In that case, I'll turn my attention to virtual attendees. Are there any people in attendance virtually who would like to make a comment at this point? If you would, you can raise your hand in the lower part of your screen on Zoom. All right. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Next on the agenda, we have routine approvals. Is there a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on the routine agenda? In that case, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Sidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
All right, and just to confirm, we can hear you now, Carlene and Laurel. All right. Moving on to action items. Agenda item 6A is a motion to approve a new course request for AP African American Studies. This is shown in attachment 6A.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on this item?
Jackie?
Yeah, I see you, Laurel. Go ahead. I
Okay,
apologize.
Sorry. I just wanted to check again. Are there in the current course that we've been offering any 9th or 10th graders?
Chris Merritt's coming to the
Thank you.
desk. Just give her a second. So I think the question was, are there currently any 9th or 10th graders in the course as it currently exists? Is that right, Laurel?
Yes.
I don't have class list in front of me. Jess James is on Zoom. She can maybe join. I believe in the course catalog, the current course is also 11th and 12th grade in the course guide.
I don't think there's any.
I don't think there is. They don't have a lot of room in their schedule.
Right.
But I really can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's upperclassmen, 11th, 12th graders.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll vote for it because I don't see a reason not to have it. In general, I would still like for us to be looking for a way for people who may be interested in the subject matter and don't have a full year in their schedule to have some way of accessing. And I know we talked about the other social justice courses that we have and all, but I think I was excited about this semester course when it was first introduced, very enthusiastic that we should have it. And I think that idea of allowing more kids to take it has a lot of validity. So perhaps when we have this, perhaps we will get enough signups that we could actually have both courses. That's what I think would be great. So.
All right. Is there any other discussion at the table? Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Next up is agenda item 6B, which is a motion to approve the purchase of an IB Physics textbook. This is shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion at the table? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
All right, agenda item 6C is a motion to approve the fund balance resolution. This is shown in attachment 6C.
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
So we'd just like to start things off tonight while Mr. Vigileone gets our presentation set up. Just like to explain that we had, this is a normal part of our process at this time of year where we're preparing to finalize our audit and annual financial statements. We've prepared much of this material for the Finance Committee last week at a special meeting, but we would just like to highlight some information for you very quickly here tonight. So if we can go ahead to slide 3. What we provided is a preliminary actual unassigned fund balance reconciliation. Started off with revenue of $185,600,000 and change, have expenses before cap reserve and fund balance commitments of $174 million and change, leaving an available fund balance of $11 million. We're going to talk a little bit briefly here about some of the uses of the fund balance here over the evening, and this will leave us with $14.5 million in unassigned ending fund balance, which is just below the maximum allowable percentage of 8%. Here, what we provided for your information is just an analysis looking at the actual fund balance at June 30, 2022, the budget, the proposed changes to fund balance, and then the preliminary actual fund balance. Your resolution is to transfer $9 million to the Capital Reserve Fund for future capital projects. There is also an addition of $792,790 to fund the committed health insurance designation, increasing that to just under $8 million. We want to create a debt service commitment of $27,389,041, and then eliminate the revenue shortfall and PSERS committed fund balances. The revenue shortfall was created during the pandemic. The PSERS was created probably over a decade ago. And now that the economy has rebounded and retirement costs have leveled out, we recommend eliminating those commitments. And all of this allows us to maintain the unassigned general fund balance just below the 8% minimum. I'm sorry, maximum. The Capital Reserve Fund, the purpose is an intentional set aside of fund balance to offset or fund future capital projects. PDE guidance says that transfers to Capital Reserve funds are not allowed when the general fund has access. The multi-year projections show greater expense than revenue. Therefore, we cannot budget a transfer. If the excess exists at the end of the fiscal year, we can complete a transfer. So if the proposed transfer is completed, the ending fund balance this year, for this previous fiscal year would be approximately $70 million. As we've talked about previously, there are multiple projects that we are working towards funding. There is a physical plant building project which we are hoping will get started, even though it was approved several months ago, hoping to get a building permit in the next week or so. but that is in expectation of the use of capital reserve fund. Mount Nittany Elementary School, we're working on a addition. We have a very high level estimate of $20 million. Panorama office, village office renovation, we have no cost estimate yet, but as we move people around out of Fairmont into the physical plant building, and then some people back into Panorama, as well as the IT folks into the north building renovation, we would like to do some renovations here as well. We also have an HVAC issue that we're going to be approaching or attacking in that renovation. Also, outcomes of our district-wide facility master plan, which is obviously focusing on Park Forest Middle School, and then athletics and playgrounds. Okay, and now Mr. Vigileone is going to take over.
Good evening. Before I get started on the general fund, I just want to take a second to thank Donna Reinhardt for all the hard work she did pulling these numbers together and trying to explain them to me. We'll see how much I've retained actually for what she's explained, but she's just been doing a great job in the accounting office pulling this reporting together. So we'll get into the summary for the general fund results as compared to projected. Revenue did come in stronger than budgeted as the economic effects of the pandemic waned. The majority of the additional funds are being, as Mr. Brown explained, applied to a proposed transfer to capital reserve. Going into the revenue highlights a little deeper, the local revenue is higher due to higher earned income tax revenue and interest income. Those are due to the impacts of inflation going through that we've seen over the last year. The increase in state revenue is mainly due to an increase in the basic education subsidy announced after the completion of the 2022-2023 SCASD budget. It's just a timing issue. And then the ESSER funds will be ending in the 23-24 year. Looking at the historical change for earned income tax, you can see it's on an upward trajectory. Personally, I'm going to ad-lib here and say I believe this is perhaps showing a little higher slant north than what we would typically expect because of the exiting of the pandemic. So I think you'll see the numbers sort of level out over the next year, but I think the impacts of the negative and then 2 upper years are showing the green trend line to show a bit higher of an increase than what we actually anticipate. Historical earned income tax, there was a significant decline in the real estate taxes. This account will be monitored going forward to see if the 2022-2023 was an outlier or the new normal. Interim real estate taxes are associated with new construction, and as interest rates increase, you see good outcomes in the investment, in the interest on investments, but you see sometimes negative outcomes in construction as it slows down. And as we were talking about the interest income for investments, you can see the school district last year did a very nice job in increasing those returns on the backside of when interest rates started to increase. Moving forward, here is a top-level update on where the general fund expenses ended up as compared to where they were budgeted and projected. We'll get into more detail on the following slides. And for this slide, I think the key points are health insurance, that came in lower than projected due to better than anticipated claims experience, as we are self-insured now, and then professional services coming in lower than projected due to lower anticipated athletic transportation and tax collection costs. Continuing on, there were other items which came in under budget. Some of the larger ones were charter school expenses. They were significantly lower based upon lower enrollment than anticipated. Now going to a preliminary actual to the original budget. So what did we think was going to happen sitting here about a year and a half ago versus what actually did happen over the past 12 months? So the thing I would like to highlight is the changes in plans regarding the fund balance commitment. You can see as Mr. Brown had alluded to earlier, the debt service and the health insurance are going to be the 2 remaining commitments that we are requesting at the end of the year, and with the elimination of the revenue shortfall and the PSERS commitment. Again, this is just more reiteration as compared actual to original budget. The local EIT interest rate, as we talked about, the interest income as we talked about, they increased because of inflation and the basic ed subsidy from the Commonwealth. Again, that was a timing issue that the state tends to pass their budget right at the end of the fiscal year rather than in advance when we're doing our budget planning. Going further, when eliminating the unknowns and developing the 2022-23 budget, and those were those three items we mentioned, revenues were within about 1% of where they were budgeted, which shows a pretty good handle on what was actually going to occur. And if you look at the variances in excess of 100,000 budget to preliminary actual, one of the biggest changes was health insurance being down due to a good year of experience in the newly funded, in the new self-funded plan. And salaries came in a little lower, and the belief is that is due to labor market shortage. Labor market has been very difficult over the past year. And everything else within the changes was explained earlier on in the presentation. So in summary for here, if you take a look at where we ended up, if you take out the large ones that we had mentioned before, within 3% on expenditures, about 3% on expenditures, where the original budget was 18 months ago to where it ended up. That's a pretty solid crystal ball in, my experience of getting that close, that far out, especially with the unknowns associated with the development of the 2022-23 budget, as we were still in the process of exiting a pandemic from a fiscal perspective. So I'll transition back to Randy at this point.
Thanks. So, as we said earlier, our actual transfer to capital reserve is recommended at $9 million versus the $2.5 million that was budgeted. It's an additional $6.5 million. I think that we've reiterated multiple times where we believe that the majority of that money has come from, with that being earned income tax and interest income, and those are numbers that you budget and you use your historic actuals and your projections to the best of your ability moving forward. You have your resolution that's attached to this memo. If there's any questions about that resolution, we'll be happy to answer them. And then we have key review and reporting dates. And there is, as you'll notice, there is one TBD on the schedule, and that's a Finance and Audit Committee meeting where we'll discuss the audited financial statements before they're presented to the full board for approval. And we're still working on confirming that date with our auditors. Any questions?
Well, I know Debbie couldn't be here, and and Jim is the co-chair, but I was at the Finance Committee meeting, and I just really appreciated the wealth of detail that was provided about all this information. And I think, I don't think anybody could have predicted what interest income was going to do in the past year. I think it's had its benefits and downsides for the community, for everybody, certainly for anybody who's got money invested. It's been a boon. I know for home buyers, it's a pretty tough place to, get a loan. But so that's a substantial difference than what we typically see. And just, it's not something that can be anticipated. And typically when we've had a extra funds to go to capital reserve, it's always been for similar reasons. Like one year we had a lot of the big buildings downtown, and there was what's called transfer tax on those buildings. It's a one-time thing, and we would get huge chunks of money that we couldn't have predicted was going to happen, and we know is not going to happen again. And so, I appreciate this, and I think the thing for the community to understand is when we put money up front into the capital reserve fund, this means that when we do some of these projects that Mr. Brown mentioned, we won't have to borrow, hopefully, or have to borrow less in order to do those projects. And so that's a savings to the district and to the taxpayers. So it's to our advantage to, when we have these kinds of extra funds, to set them aside for the things we need to do later. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dr. Bader.
Yeah.
Mr. Leo.
So just a follow-up from the Finance Committee meeting, and Amy said most of it. And that the slide about the, $70 million in the reserve, that sounds like a lot of money, but the middle school project's going to be the second biggest project in the history or the recent history of the school district, probably the history of the school district. So that's going to take a substantial amount of money. And like Amy said, that means that type of reserve means that we will have to probably borrow less for that project. So, and the other thing, you know, school districts are, as most municipal entities, are restricted from, like, we can't invest in cryptocurrency. We can't put our fund balances in cryptocurrency or something like that. So they have to be very safe investments. And as a result, the very safe investments are based on the prime rate. And that's why, since the increase in the prime rate, that's why our interest investments have gone up, or we've realized a lot of an unusual amount of interest income this year.
Correct.
So, yeah, and then I'll also remind everyone that 2 meetings ago, we also decided to do with some one-time expenditures with some of these one-time funds to provide band instruments and science, you know, science classroom equipment. So it's not that we're saving it all for a rainy day, but we put some of it to good use. So, you know, and I like the fact that what you said, Joe, about the, you know, if you take out of these anomalous, or these spikes, basically, we're still within 3% of what we budgeted, and that's pretty good.
Thanks, Mr. Lewis. Are there any other comments at the table or from any of our board members attending virtually? Oh, I'm so sorry, Ms. Brown.
I sort of just wanted to echo a couple of the things that Amy and Jim said, but first of all, thank you to Donna and Joe and Randy for, again, the level of detail in this report. It's good for the community, it's good for board members, it's good for administrators, it's good for teachers to be able to see where this money, the projected versus, you know, where we ended up. It's transparent, so thank you for that, and thank Donna. Hopefully she's doing something different than
She's watching.
Oh, sorry, Donna. Well, thank you, Donna. Anyhow, I wanted to also say that considering the uncertainty of the last couple years, we keep saying the ending of the pandemic, or, you know, I know there's still people dying of COVID-19, so I have to kind of think about how I want to word this, but getting used to living with COVID-19. But considering how volatile everything has been, the preliminary actual versus projected is remarkably aligned. And so I think that we just need to thank Randy and his team for pulling this off, and ending up where hopefully we will end up. And also, just along the same lines, just sort of reminding the community that, and the SCASD community and the larger community, that public budgeting, in this instance, for example, is so different than personal budgeting because of the vast amounts of uncertainty that Randy and his team work with. And so sometimes, at first glance, something can look like, oh, well, there's all this extra money. Why didn't this happen in this reading program or something? And I used to think that way too, when I didn't understand how different it is than looking at your own personal budget, because there's like the state money we don't even know about for such a long time compared to what Randy's trying to budget. And so considering all of that, Randy errs on the side of not having bad things happen to people, and I appreciate that lens. And I think kids in our district also benefit from that. So those are all my comments, but basically a thank you and gratitude.
Thank you, Ms. Brandt. Is there any other comments from any board members or questions? All right, in that case, is there any public comment on this item? Randy and Joe, do you want the last word on anything?
Thank you. Thanks to my team.
Thank you. All right, seeing no public comment, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Sidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Moving on to agenda item 6D is a motion to approve several bus contractor agreements. This is shown in attachment 6D.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
I'd just like to thank the board for this opportunity. Our bus contractors are very important to us. They've been facing some very unusual economic considerations, as have we, and our students can't get delivered without them. So thank you for this consideration.
Thank you. Transportation is really important. If we don't have the kids at school, we can't teach them. So thank you for working so hard to make that happen. Are there any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll ask, is there any public comment on this action item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ms. Huff, one of our contractors is represented here this evening, and they would like to make a comment.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to come to the table if you'd like to.
Here or over there?
Wherever you feel comfortable.
Well, my name is Mike Fullington from Fullington Bus. I'm here with my CFO, Bob Bishop, and the manager of our State College School Bus, Stacy Fryer. And I'm here just to say thank you. It's an honor to be part of the State College School District. I've lived in State College for 50 years. My kids went to school here. And it's really nice working with people. I see Van Swagger's name up there. I mean, he's a great guy to work with, and Bob and Randy work together, and you know, it's just been a real pleasure. We started in 2020, and I actually started driving school bus for State College in 2020, and you know, it's been a real pleasure. Things seem to go fairly smooth. Even though it's transportation, things don't always go smooth. But I'm really here just to say thank you, and I really appreciate it, and look forward for many more years to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to go.
That's fine. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for being here. All right. Moving on, we're now going to move into information reports. So Mr. Brown is with us still to provide an update on the 2022-2023 development initiatives of the district.
Thank you. Again, much of this information was shared at the Finance Committee meeting, but as we annually do, we make a full report to the board so that you are well versed on our development efforts. Our development efforts involve two different components. One is the endowments that reside at the Center Foundation, and then the other is our State College Education Foundation. And those are non-endowed resources. Those are donations usually leave the district with, or leave the foundation and come to the district within 1 to generally not more than 2 years. There are some ongoing funds there that they continue to fundraise for. So just, again, just talking about starting off with the Center Foundation balances, there's an annual report there, annual listing of the 22 balances, excuse me. And they ended with about $3.5 million in assets, and that they gave $114,000 in distributions. And there's some detail there. There's also a link to the Center Foundation website for more information. Center gives, our Education Foundation does partner with the Center Foundation for that opportunity. Student Opportunities Fund, which is part of the Center Foundation, also was designated and named for a former teacher, and that's always the recipient of the Maroon and Gray Society event each year. Capital Campaign, we have had pledges, and many of those gifts have been received, totaling about $1.7 million. Mental Health Fund of the Center Foundation, of the State College Area School District Foundation, continues to support our mental health needs, which grow each year, don't seem to diminish. And in last year, there was $28,000 that was used by the district, funded by the foundation. Educational improvement tax credits they received $36,000 last year that they passed on to the school district. And then through our athletics office, we have advertising and signage, which we raised about $21,000 in the last fiscal year for a total of $63,000. There's also a detail there of that program since its inception. The district does fund the SCASD Education Foundation by about $120,000 each year. There's a history of the revenue generated through the foundation. And the administration continues to work with the foundation, and actually this week, we're going to be excited to make recommendations for the next round of student opportunity grant applications, and hopefully those funds will be available to teachers and other staff and faculty in the very near future. Had a resounding 67 applicants, totaling $102,000. Unfortunately, not all of those grants will be able to be funded at this time, but it's also exciting, and that also gives the foundation an opportunity to share that there are a growing number of needs, and hopefully they can raise even more money for next year. Any questions?
As the representative from the board to the foundation, it was just helpful at the foundation recent board meeting. We also went through a lot of this data. And I guess one important function that the foundation serves, aside from the fundraising that it does, we use the phrase pass-through, but it is an important organization that can take donations from the community that are donated with specific needs, like say to the Music Boosters Club. But by having the foundation, it means those funds are then tax deductible for those community members, whereas in the past, when community members made a donation to a booster club, because they're not a 501(c)(3),
Right.
yeah, so they're not a designated nonprofit, so those are not tax exempt funds. So that's one. It's a benefit for all of our smaller organizations in the district to have that opportunity to ask donors to go through there and hopefully entice donors to maybe be a little, more generous, or at least to honor the help that they provide those organizations. So I just wanted to add that's another function that they serve for us.
Thanks, Thank you, Dr. Bader. Are there any other? Laurel, go ahead.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm just going to read something that's a little easier, I think. This agenda item, though, it's not immediately obvious in the annual foundation report to the board, which is linked to last week's financial committee meeting. This past year was by far the foundation's least successful year since the 2 startup years of 2015-16. As Randy confirmed, this past year, the foundation raised net new revenue of only $8,135, with expenses being $122,127. There were no new pledges to the Memorial Field campaign, and the last major gift, which was a very generous $1 million gift, was approved over 2 years ago. It's the pledges from those three large gifts that made the poor performance not immediately obvious at first glance, because it was offset by $330,000 in cash revenue from those pledges that were made, as I said, several years ago. If you look only at major gifts, so if all we had asked was major gifts, the foundation spent 94 cents to raise $1 of major gifts. If you look at the rest of the fundraising, the annual campaign, which initially was what we were focused on, the foundation lost 12 cents for every $1 it spent. As a district, we need to be transparent about this. Though the report says that these results constitute progress toward the plan's implementation, it's hard for me to see how that is the case, and how just continuing to monitor, which we've said every year we'll do, is going to reverse this trend. As to what was mentioned earlier about the foundation also serving as a way for people to donate tax exempt. The school district is a government agency, and as such, if you Google it, the IRS says donations to the school district, even if designated, are tax exempt. The point has been raised in the past that many tax people who prepare to the tax returns say, oh, it's not, but then we should be investing in a good, breakfast once a year or so to talk with those people and explain to them why, in fact, if people donate directly to the district, they can take a tax exemption to the extent that anyone can for charitable giving these days. So.
Yes, Dr. Duffy.
Yeah, Laurel and I have been around for a while. Laurel even longer, actually. I want to acknowledge Laurel's veteran work as a member of the board, but I just want to acknowledge the validity of the questions that she seems to be raising. If I think about the early days of the development of the foundation, and we really, I want to preface this by saying that members of the board were just delighted by the work of the foundation board, and particularly in terms of their support for the various independent funding for facilities such as the Memorial Field. We are just delighted with the work that people have put into that and the commitment of various members of the community. It's highly valued, and frankly, we couldn't look over into the future. We couldn't see the future in terms of what would happen, but it really has turned out to be every bit as significant a resource as we might have imagined and as we were hoping for in the beginning. However, now that our needs have shifted, I think the dynamics of the financial side of this have changed, and I think we need to have ongoing conversations with the foundation board about costs, essentially, in relation to personnel, in relation to the management of the performance of the foundation and the expectations of the foundation for support from us in relation to the benefits to kids. We're not. We have to be careful that we're not like, when we're not making erroneous decisions in terms of the way in which we're managing funds in terms of our work with the foundation. I think we just have to work more closely with the foundation board about these kinds of issues and anticipate that these patterns may not change as time goes on. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Duffy. Dr. Bader.
Yeah, I just want to clarify a couple of things. No doubt, we have to monitor if this is a worthwhile expense. And I was there too, Dan, at the beginning and the formation of the foundation. And while excited to have the benefits of what they provided, there were a lot of discussions about concern about putting forth funds to seed the foundation to start. So that has been a pretty active discussion all along. Just a couple clarifications, though, and maybe some additional information that might be helpful. One, in terms of the tax exempt thing, I think the number of organizations that go do a pass-through right now in the foundation would not be manageable by our staff to process all those. I think that would be challenging. That's a minor issue, but just a clarification. The other addition is without the foundation, we cannot get EITC funds. Now, they're not astronomical. They've run about $30,000 to $36,000 a year. But legally, we cannot receive those funds unless they go through an education foundation. So we would lose access to that opportunity if we didn't have a foundation. It's certainly $30,000 for 120, I understand, would be, if that was the sole purpose, it would not be a good use of our funds. The third piece, Dan, in terms of your comments about what's going on in the development world, and that was something that was actively discussed at the foundation meeting, was that there's a nationwide dip in giving in general, and it's not surprising that it's lagged somewhat behind, you know, some of the big bursts of giving during the pandemic. I think a lot of people are, and I would argue that rising inflation also has dampened giving for people because there's a lot of uncertainty, and people need to make sure they can take care of their family and do all those things. So it is a delicate year. It's been a bad year for other things. I'm on another nonprofit board personally myself, and we've really, really struggled to raise funds this year as well. So I don't discount that it's not a good year. I do know that I will share for the rest of the board, the foundation has, you know, decided they're going to try and do some things to improve that number. They have some strategies in mind that they'd like to implement, you know, in an effort to increase their donor base, increase donations. So they're aware that that's an issue. And I don't disagree. It's something we need to continually monitor, and that's why we have representation on the foundation board. So I promise to do my best to, you know, report back and keep tabs on things as best I can. So just that additional information I thought might be helpful.
Thanks, Dr. Bader. Dr. Buck?
Yeah, I thank you, Dr. Bader, for saying that. I just think that, you know, seeing a change in, you know, in the behavior in a pattern, and then saying or implying that it must be caused by something inside of the foundation may not be true or necessarily helpful.
Ms. Brandt.
I just wanted to thank Dr. Bader for communicating to the board as the foundation liaison, because that, I think, is one of the most vital pieces to keep the entire system running in a transparent and healthy way. And when we don't have that communication, we know that that does cause some trouble. And so the communication that we're constantly getting is really important and much appreciated.
Dr. Crevecoeur, would you like to unmute? Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to actually thank both Dr. Bader and Ms. Zidney, because I think the way I read it initially, I didn't see a lot of the facts that Laura did bring up, and I think that's important to talk about. And having said that, though, I do like the fact that Dr. Bader did clear up some questions that, you know, after Laura spoke, you know, I was reading it over. I don't think that the memo was extremely as transparent as I would have liked. And I do know that a lot of nonprofits, they do have ups and downs, but I don't think that that memo reflected that as accurately as I would have liked. So I do appreciate both board members for clearing up these facts.
Ms. Zidney. You're still muted.
Sorry,
There you
I
go.
apologize.
You're good.
I do have one question. In the reports that we received last week, and that I based the numbers on that were in that foundation report of expenses, I'm wondering if those include the amount that the district paid to settle a lawsuit related to the foundation fundraising.
Yes.
Those included as an expense?
Actually, I can't answer that, I'm sorry. I initially said yes, but I can't answer that off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I just make one comment?
Please.
To go a little bit upon what Dr. Bader said about donations, she was completely correct about the EITC. The district would not receive any of those funds. Some years they've been in excess of $50,000. Most years they've been averaging in the 30s. However, there are many other donations that, as Ms. Zidney said, could still come through the district. But we also hear on a regular basis, and especially before the foundation was created, that donors would not make a donation to the school district because their tax advisor did not advise that it would be a tax-deductible donation without the gift being going to a 501c3. And so that is an extreme benefit that we do receive by having our own education foundation. So just wanted to whether someone can Google something and they believe it or not, it is I'm not I didn't mean to criticize Ms. Sidney. I'm saying that other people don't always believe what they may or may not find on the internet.
Sometimes there's misinformation.
And sometimes there is misinformation. And what we do repeatedly here is that we want, that the donors want verification that it is going to a 501c3.
Mhm.
So I just I apologize. That did not come out real well. I apologize.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions or discussion on this item? All right, thank you so much, Mr. Brown. All right, next up is policy time. So Ms. Pierce is going to join us to review several new and revised policies we have on the agenda for this evening. Good evening, Ms. Pierce.
Good evening. So, back to our usual routine here. The Policy Development Committee has worked through a number of policies for us tonight. The first one is the policy on making policies.
Very meta.
We're going to have a meeting about meetings.
Yeah, yeah.
I know.
This is a policy recommended by PSBA to explain the purpose, how to maintain policies, and the difference between policies and administrative regulations. This is all pretty much straight out of PSBA. The committee did not make any changes. So anybody have any questions about how we make policies?
I think we're all good to go on that one.
All right.
Oh, Dr. Buck.
Yeah, I do have a question. And this is more for maybe the public to know, is the board entitled to know whether an administrative regulation has been changed?
Well, in my tenure here, I haven't changed any, but I would hazard that the answer is yes.
So, well, Gretchen and I may be able to answer, or you can answer logistically, but in terms of when we made the switch to having, I just wanted to share some history that might be helpful to help answer your question, then CJ can, so there used to sometimes be guidelines in policies, and then sometimes there were they were called guidelines that were about the operational piece. And so when we first came on the board 8 years ago, we had gone to PSBA, where Laurel and Carlene are right now. There were some discussions about how to better structure your policy manual. And so they recommended this shift from using the term policy and administrative regulations. And I guess the culture that came out of that, and Jim can speak to too, was that, administrative regulations should be presented and reviewed by the board, but we don't approve them. It's to look that they align with whatever's in the policy, that they aren't oppositional to what has been outlined in policy. So when they're ready to come forward, if they're ready with a policy, then we make sure that they're aligned when they come, but we only vote on the policy portion. So that's kind of how we've been operating for the past several years in terms of thinking about those two pieces. But CJ can answer more of the operational thing.
So I don't think all administrative regulations come to the board. I think about the handbook. Wouldn't that be?
It's not a regulation.
It's not but there's a policy on discipline, and in the discipline it says they're going to be carried out through administrative regulations, right? Yeah,
you said it, so it's right.
Because there's yes. So I don't think all of them, although we're not willing.
Sometimes get mixed up on the districts, but doesn't the administration bring student handbooks forward?
We've seen them when they've been, when there were some,
When-
what you brought, they came
When
forward
there's
when there were substantial changes.
When there are substantial changes, but if we, not annually.
Other districts do. But so the disciplinary guidelines as reflected in the student handbook, I think are consistent with the law, and where it's discretionary, consistent with the district's beliefs. And as you say, when there are changes, substantive changes, they come before the board, but maybe annually that should be something that you add to your agenda for approval, so it comes forward. But I view that almost as a lowercase p, not a board policy, but a district operational procedure and policy.
And the regulations are posted, though, all in the policy
With the
section, so they're
policy.
accessible
To everyone.
to everyone.
They're
yeah.
actually attached to the policy.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I think that the practice has been, it's a matter of trust, that in general, it's not a big issue. The regulations have been sort of just the nitty gritty. But at the same time, sometimes, even if it does not conflict with policy, there can be a lot in there to the degree that it would be very helpful for the board to see it, and that the board may sometimes want to have a discussion about them. So that even though we don't have approved, but they do not need to be approved. So technically, they could be changed without our approval. And minor details, I think, have been occasionally, but they've been minor. And in practice, when there have been major changes, they've usually gone along with a change in the policy. So we've seen both. And people, I don't know if even all the administrative regulations that we currently have are attached to the policies. Do you know? Do we have some policies that have regulations that aren't attached?
Two things. One, in the past year, we have processed so many policies. Some of them do reference regulations. The regulations have not yet been written. The other is, in reviewing our policies, even though there are some older policies that reference regulations, they are not in board docs, and we're right now trying to locate them. So it's a mixed bag. There are policies that have regulations attached.
And I mean, my basic point is that no, we don't technically have approval. It is a matter of trust, and as far as I know, that trust has never been violated. So I think it's been working fairly well. But it would certainly be nice to see them when there are changes made.
And in the past year, as when we've written them, we've shared them with the board.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't always get written as quickly as the policy.
All right, Ms. Brandt?
Thanks, Jackie. I just wanted to say that everything that Amy was just talking about, that's why some of the remnants that Linda was just referring to are still there from the switch to the guidelines, to the
Correct.
regulations. So,
Correct.
and the policy committee has been working so hard to get through those, so thank you for that. But there's still some remnants out there. And one thing that really has helped me throughout the years is looking at it, this is very simple, but that the policy comes from the board writes the policy, and so that's like the legislative branch, if you want to make an analogy, and that the administration is like the executive branch who actually executes the policies that the board creates. And so if you look at it that way, yeah, there's a level of trust, but that is built into the system. And should the regulations ever differ so much from the spirit of the policy that the board intended, then it would be, the check on that would be that the board would change the policy. So it's sort of in the checks and balances within the system itself And that sort of analogy has always helped me not only understand it myself, but then explain it to other people as they're trying to figure out what's a regulation, what's a policy. Does the board have to approve regulations? If you kind of look at it like that, it makes a lot of sense. So just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Dr. Buck.
Yeah, I think that what, I don't even know if this is a concern. I'm not sure that it needs to be explicated, but that the oversight function for the interaction between the policy and then the administrative procedures, guidelines, et cetera, yeah, the guidelines, is that, let's just use all the words, is to make sure that should the board suspect, for whatever reason, and I'm also not implying to the public or anybody that there's like something awry here, but I'm trying to just make sure that the board can be secure in an oversight function such that were a member of the board to say at the table, I think that we need to have a discussion about what these guidelines, regulations, et cetera, are, and a majority of the board said, yes, let's bring it forward, that we can just do that. Great.
If you run out of things to talk about, sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, just think about how much we talked about that, the survey policy.
Yeah.
For example,
Yes.
right? And where we had the administrative regulations brought before us, right? And there was a lot to that. Some other policy in the future might come. So I just wanted to be able to make sure that the public can understand that we're able to like pick something up, look behind the curtain, and that dynamic relationship between like the equivalent of the executive and its agency and the legislative branch is operable here.
All right, so are we good to move this policy about policies, 000?
For action.
For action.
Zupa policy.
All right.
Okay. Next is policy 137, home education programs. Again, the changes are recommended by PSBA. This policy was originally called homeschool policy. Now they're suggesting a title of home education programs.
So the last time this was revised was 2003, so a lot has changed in the world of public education since then, and so this is just to reflect the updates.
That is correct.
Including the lexicon. Are there any questions or comments about policy 100?
137.
137, thank you.
And we hashed out some procedural things that was really helpful to have Chris Merritt at the meeting we went through. So, so that was helpful. Some things about curriculum and materials and stuff we
Right.
made sure was accurate, which is good.
All right, so it sounds like we are okay to move that one to action as well.
Good. Then we have 142, migrant students, again, from PSBA. This would be a new policy. I think it's relatively straightforward.
I would agree it's relatively straightforward. Any questions or comments on this policy?
We're plowing through a lot of logistical ones, so there's, yeah.
All right, we'll move that one to action as well.
And then we have 202, which is eligibility of non-resident students. Just a couple changes in this one. Again, changes that are recommended by PSBA. The bold language is the new language.
I do too.
It's really purple. I just
Yeah,
Jim
so just
doesn't
if-
see color so well.
My 8th grade social studies teacher would have been really happy if it was really purple.
Yeah, those are pretty minimal changes
Yeah.
to the wording, so if there are no objections, we'll move that one on to action as well.
Thank you. And then we have 208, withdrawal from school. Again, some updated language suggested by PSBA.
Yeah, and there were a couple little tweaks about, in the overview about counseling services being available and that, efforts would be made to, if a student just came in and said they were going to withdraw, to encourage them to stay, that we would make sure that they had all the available supports available before they made the choice to do that. So there's a couple little sentences in there that we thought was just helpful to convey that that would be the effort. If somebody came in, we wouldn't just go, okay. Our goal is to get them to stay and graduate. And Dan suggested some of those, so I'll just mention that.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, any questions or comments on this one?
Thanks, Amy.
You got it.
All right, I think we can move that one
Move
to
that
action
one
as
on.
well.
Next one is 239, foreign exchange students. There's definitely a student theme here tonight. And again, some updated language proposed by PSBA.
All right, Ms. Zidney. You're still muted, Laurel.
There we go.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, this one, and this is an example, it says that in the regulations will indicate that the board could approve waiving tuition even for more than 5 students. But the way the policy is written, it says any additional students above 5 may be admitted, but shall be on a tuition paying basis. And I think changing that to maybe or ordinarily or actually including that, because the way it currently reads, any administrative guideline that said that we could waive it, it's not that it necessarily conflicts, but it seems very odd to say shall in one place and then in a regulation say, well, but you could always waive it. I mean, we could always waive anything we want to. So we did only 1 year that I've been on the board have an issue where there were more than 5 students. It's not common, but that had a chilling effect on the willingness of people to even try to get those students here.
I thought we hashed this out in the committee, and Jean Knaus had some different information in regards to how frequently we've done that, and also we haven't had applications for more than 5 in many, many years.
I believe I sent you the email specifically, though I don't remember the date. I can resend it.
So
I know we discussed whether there was really a need to change the 5. I'd have to ask Jean again.
So I didn't really see these things in conflict. Like, I understand, like, perhaps I should be more attentive to shall and should, and maybe there's a reason I'm not on the policy committee. Maybe there's a reason I'm not there anymore. But I didn't really see these in conflicts because it says basically if any additional student above 5 is admitted, they shall be on a tuition paying basis unless the administration asks us to waive that tuition as part of the regulation, and then we can consider.
Oh, I know what it was now. Didn't Jean say that there's new state regulations, like we can't, there was something that she said had changed at the state since the
English
last-
learners.
English language learners.
No, that was the other policy when I know what you're talking about, Carleen, when we said that, that we took that part out. Was that the piece? I thought it was something about the 5. I
thought that
apologize.
was
I
the
don't have it
piece.
at the tip of my mind, and I didn't jot the notes down on that one. I'd have to, and I don't know that it's in the minutes. But
I don't have my notes with me, but I believe that was the reason why, because of the English learners. I wish I had my notes with me, because I believe that was something to do with that, though.
So we talked about how English
We
learners
did talk about it.
tend to require additional resources.
Right.
Mhm.
And
That was
so
part of it.
if it's an English speaking foreign exchange student, they might not
Exactly.
require the additional resources that a non-native English speaker would.
That might be it.
Yeah, it was something along those lines.
And so it's rare for them to even consider bringing more than
Right.
5 because of those additional resources needed for the exchange students.
That was part of it.
Dr. Buck,
Between the three of us, we pulled it together.
Dr. Buck, you've been very patient. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if it is a concern for the board that should we end up with 6 or 7, in some year, I think having written into the policy, any additional students above 5 may be admitted, but any such students shall be on a tuition-paying basis unless waived by the board. And then
All their
and
conversation.
then that whole thing gets wiped out. But it has to be an action of the board, and I think that would be it's prudent, fiscally. It has forethought. We're leaving the possibility that if Laurel is right and there was a year when we had 6 or 8 or something like that, I think that just makes a lot of sense. It's like 4 words or something.
So
Yeah,
in the
I have to check
past,
with-
And if there-
I have to
and if
check-
there
there's
is a
something that Jean
reason,
said. Yeah, there was
then
something
we
Jean
can-
said, but we'll double check what it was.
just so you know, in the past, it came to the board for approval if we went above
Yeah.
6. I mean, 5.
But I don't think we.
Should tell
I don't think it's
But it
happened
only
in like.
has happened
Yeah, I don't
once.
think. Yeah.
So can we consider adding that phrase and running it by Jean Canals?
Yeah.
Just to make sure that's in line with everything. And if everything's cool, then we'll bring it for action. Laurel, is that okay with you? Okay, she's shaking her head yes. So
Cool.
Sorry, yeah, no, I think adding that would be fine.
okay, thank you, and thank you for the suggestion, Dr. Buck.
And then last but not least,
Oh, definitely.
we have 903, which is public participation in board meetings. We've received some suggestions on changing our language a bit. The last time we revised it was in 2021. And unfortunately, I don't see, there is no bold, so I'm not sure which of this language is new.
I think it was tricky because, we had some suggested revisions
Right.
that was different than the original. And then after some discussions, some pretty, involved discussions.
Pretty much
We took a bit of a turn. And so it's kind of been drafted largely.
I was going to say, not that we rewrote it, but we rewrote it.
Yeah. A lot of it was, alternate language was selected.
There you go.
As opposed to some of the proposed original stuff. So, yeah. And some of the changes, there's some recent case law that we consulted with Mr. Adder about and made sure that we were covered appropriately regarding that. And this was one case for the full board to just we use that word guidelines in here, but these were specifically, there was discussion in the committee that in that section, they did need to be within the policy just because the board has the authority to make that decision and dictate, those parameters. And so we felt like it needed to be in the policy as opposed to the administrative regulation because it should be controlled solely by the board.
It's a function of the board.
Yeah, it's a function of the board, exactly. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So that was a really healthy discussion about roles and responsibilities.
Dr. Buck.
So this is really focused on public comment, but what do we do when people dressed as dinosaurs come to meetings?
That's so.
We could put that in the
Incite
regulation.
that would be inciting an immediate breach of the peace. If they came in and disrupted the whole meeting,
Yeah.
then I would think that would fulfill that. Scott, you could speak better.
Yeah, or what if they then read something that they deem to be obscene or lewd or of prurient interest? They deem it that way, but then they are the readers. Are we allowed to shut them down for violating their own principle? I'm sort of confused by that.
I don't have much to say about that in response. The only thing I would say is that, having sat through, unfortunately, thousands of school board meetings during
Yeah.
the course of my career, I have an expansive view on what's appropriate in
Sure.
public comment. And I think what Amy referenced, the relatively recent case out of a school district to the east of us, pretty much is in line with my thought process. With very limited exception,
Mhm.
public comment is almost no holds barred. It would have to get
Sure.
pretty bad to get to the point where I think public comments beyond what's appropriate.
So you would have
Legally
to have
appropriate.
an actual legal, like, cascade of obscenities for
Well,
Ms.
in the
Huff
context
to
that
shut
you,
it down.
you have said that if they're saying that I'm raising an objection to a book or a series of books that you have in the library, and I think that they have vulgar speech, and here's a paragraph where
Sure.
the cascading example. I think in that context, it would be my position that that's appropriate comment because they're bringing their concern about the vulgarity in the books that you have in your library.
The alleged vulgarity.
The alleged vulgarity. Well, in the context of the cascading swear words or whatever you use after cascading.
Cascading obscenities.
Obscenities.
But they would, so they're permitted to do that under this policy, but they would not be able to show, say, actual pornography that they could,
I think
they could not do that at the podium.
Well, as Mr. Justice Potter wrote in his famous "I know obscenity when I see it," I think that's something that I or someone else, as my predecessor who sat in this chair for probably 40 years would say, he was the parliamentarian.
Yeah.
So I guess if at a certain point in time that I thought a showing of pornography was beyond what was necessary to illustrate a legitimate point, I at that point might say something. But again, would have to see it to give better examples, I guess, than I'm able to come up with at the moment.
All right. Thanks.
Ms. Zidney.
Thank you. So I've been on the board now for almost 12 years. And when I first joined the board and was looking through policies, at that time we actually got a thick binder of printed policies. Reading through them, came across the policy on public comment, and at the time it said that the public comment could be up to 5 minutes. But since the time I've been on the board, it has always been announced at the beginning that it would be 3 minutes. And I remember talking with the former board president about, gee, maybe we should bring it in line with what's actually happened. We talked about that for years. And then 2 years ago, it was brought, a little less than 2 years ago, this policy was brought forward to be redone. And at that time, actually, it was reduced to 2 minutes. And I objected and voted against it. But in fact, it has stayed at 3 minutes. It said 2 minutes unless otherwise announced, and it's been announced as 3 minutes. So I think that the move in this version to put it at 3 minutes, which has been the norm for at least 12 years, makes a lot of sense. And I was glad to see that change. At the same time, there was one change. I was glad to see a lot of the changes that had been discussed in the policy meeting not make it forward. There's one addition that came through that I am concerned about, and that is to actually say that people may not, in effect, that people may not comment on action items at the beginning of the meeting, but must wait. We've never required that, and often people have wanted to make a comment and leave. And I think if that's, I think it would be great if they stayed around. And I know state law requires us to allow people to comment before we vote. But I see no reason to stipulate in this that you could only talk about non-action items at the beginning. We have had very few, relatively speaking, board meetings that have had even more than just a couple of speakers. We've had many, the vast majority of our meetings have had no public commenters. There has been one meeting in 12 years where we did have people dressed in dinosaurs, but what I think is interesting about bringing that up is also what's interesting about having this on our agenda for the second time in 2 years. we attended it, I'm at the PSBA conference, as is Carleen. We attended the keynote this morning, which was on civility. And part of the point that was made in there is that sometimes it's not only what you say, but how you say it and when you say it. And when we bring a policy like this forward again, it seems to imply that there have been real problems with public comments. And if anyone has watched board meetings around the country, we are very fortunate. And I think it's because by and large, we as board members try hard to set a civil tone and do so, even when we disagree with one another. And the public, the vast majority of the time, even in all these contentious times, has echoed the way we behave. I'm really unhappy that this is in front of us again. And very specifically, we have a policy 906 for public complaints. A few years ago, one of the spate of when we had more than a couple of people speaking, it was about a sports team. And they said specifically, we went looking, how do we deal with this? And you have a policy on complaints, and it talks about a formal form, but we can't find that form. And we said at the time we wanted to update that policy, which actually is an important one and talks about a form that simply doesn't exist. And yet we have time to update this one twice in 2 years and have never touched 906. That to me says something about what message we're trying to send. And I've thought a lot about this, and I'm actually going to ask a personal favor of all of you. Normally things would come back in the 2 weeks from now. I will be leaving the board in just over a month. I'd really rather not deal with this again, because to me, I'd probably vote against it simply because of the message it sends to bring it back so quickly when there have not been real problems. It disturbs me that it's come back. And if you could just wait, I also think it's a good practice when you've got an incoming board, and no matter what the outcome of the election, there will be new board members. 2 of us who are on the board currently are not, 3 of us, sorry Jim, will not be on the board. So allowing that new board a chance to talk about something as important as public comment makes a lot of procedural sense. So that was going to be my suggestion and request as a favor, that it just wait until you have a new board to talk about it. So thanks for hearing me out on that. I know it was lengthy.
Laurel, there is one thing I need to correct you on. The current policy states that the board shall provide an opportunity for public comment at the beginning of each meeting on any district-related subject not on the board agenda. That is current language.
Thank you. I had missed that. Thanks for correcting me.
Yeah, and I was also going to add, I know I haven't, my tenure as president hasn't been that lengthy, but that's been my practice up to this point. If someone is commenting at the beginning of the meeting on an action item, I'll ask them to wait. The other thing too, I just want to mention, Laura, just a slightly different perspective, is that there have been a lot of court cases decided around the issues of public comment recently, and that is one of the reasons why this policy is coming up again, just because we need to adhere to decisions. I see Scott turning on his microphone, so I'm going to let him talk.
Well, I don't attend the policy committee meetings, so I'm not privy to what happened, but I'm assuming that this policy and the proposed changes originated with PSBA, and then it came to the committee, and the committee views it in the context of State College Area School District.
Yes.
So it wasn't as if the committee brought it up saying we need to make these changes. It came to them from PSBA, and then the committee did its due diligence to make sure that it worked for the district.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, and I just want to make one point about the asking people to make their comment before the official action item. That was a language that Amber and I instituted when we were in leadership in our discussion about when we do the little blurb about public comment and how it will be run at the meeting. And largely that was because, particularly during the pandemic, oftentimes people came expecting that something like X is going to happen. And it turns out if they had waited to hear the discussion of the action item, it turns out Y was happening. And so there was a lot of sometimes, just inefficient time and a lack of, it created a lack of communication, because sometimes people would come and we're like, well, we're discussing that and it may be different than you anticipate. And so that's why the request was made for them to consider waiting until the actual action item, because sometimes they just didn't have the either the information changed or they just didn't come across the correct information. So that was a request that started, I don't know, probably 3 years ago or so. We, during the pandemic, we added that language in there, and that was our rationale, and we thought it was a pretty reasonable one.
Ms. Brandt?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Amy just said, because what would happen is arguments would escalate at the beginning of the meeting completely needlessly, because it was not going to happen, all these rumors that people would hear or whatever. And so rather than have community members sort of go at it with each other at the beginning of the meeting, that's what was changed. And that really not only saved time, but it saved feelings, emotion. I mean, it was there were lots of reasons for it, and they were good reasons. And even though this may happen once in 12 years and that may happen only twice or whatever, I mean, I understand that, but at the same time, you want to have a good system so that no matter what pops up, you're not wasting time, you're not adding fuel to people's fires that are going to get out of control for, I'll just use the word needlessly. So just to expand upon what Amy said.
Dr. Crevecore, and then we'll come to you, Dr. Buck.
Sure.
Basically, I kind of want to echo exactly what Ms. Brandt and Dr. Boehner just said, because that has just happened recently at the policy meeting when the homeschool issue was brought up, and I did raise a few questions that concerned me. And afterwards, one of the people that were there basically said, you answered a lot of my questions that I was going to ask, and I appreciate you saying that. So I do think that waiting until these action items are brought up and have a discussion about it, I think it's better. I think it makes the whole meeting runs more smoothly. And we don't want to also, if somebody says things in the beginning and by the time the action item is brought up, that has lost its impact. So if some of the community members disagree with anything that we have said about, I think at that time, I think it would be more appropriate for them to bring up the issue or even agree and thank us for our discussion. So I do think that we should leave it where it is.
Dr. Buck?
Yeah, I agree with what Dr. Crevecore, Dr. Bader, and Ms. Brandt have said. And, I think of an example where I know that members of the public on a potentially really polarizing issue like our school resource officers, right, where we have these very, very vocal polls in our community, and if were they able to come and speak just whatever it is they believed about it before hearing our deliberation on an item, I think that could incite a lot of, I'll echo Ms. Brandt, the needlessness of emotion when the careful deliberation on the matter is the much more important thing. And I just want to say that again. The careful deliberation on the thing at hand really, really matters, and making sure that we're talking about what we need to be talking about, not everything in 14 kitchen sinks.
Any other comments? All right, I want to acknowledge Ms. Zidney's request, but I would be fine bringing this forward for action. Are there any other objections aside from Ms. Zidney? I'm sorry. Oh. All right.
I think usually it's 30 days that we have to bring it up. I know the survey.
That has been your practice. That's not written down anywhere.
A little P procedure as opposed to.
Okay. Well, it could be that someone at a seminar I was at gave the incorrect information. But there was a recent webinar that I thought was pretty emphatic that policy had to be complete.
Well, that could be true. It just isn't in our policy. We can put it there. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Pierce. Next on the agenda is an opportunity for board members to provide an update on their committee initiatives. First up is the CIU report, which Dan usually gives. I talked to Dan before the meeting, and he just asked to defer until he was actually in person. So I'll just go ahead and say that the search for Central Intermediate Unit's permanent home continues, and we'll hear more details from Dan when he's back in person. Next up, we have the SCASD Education Foundation. Amy, do you have anything to add that didn't already get said tonight? All right, perfect. CTC Local Advisory Committee from Carlene. Carlene, do you have anything to add about that committee?
Nope, not at the moment.
Or anything from athletics while I've got you?
Nope, not at the moment.
All right, thank you so much. CAC for facilities, Gretchen and or Peter, is there anything to add?
Meeting is on Thursday, October 19th from 4 to 5:30.
All right. Laurel, is there any CAC for finance update?
It was pretty much covered. A lot of it was the foundation update, and then we had the update on the resolution. And there was one other item, but I cannot remember what it is. I'll need help from Randy. I read over the minutes and they seemed accurate.
Okay.
There was the development stuff that Lauren did about that was in tonight's presentation too. Is that what you're thinking of maybe?
Well, but he wasn't there, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, the development from all the
Scoreboard,
signage
yeah,
from
that
athletics
the
and
whole
stuff.
finance thing, yeah.
All right. Are there, Amy and Dan, probably Amy, are there any CAC liaison reports for school health and safety?
I don't think we've met. I think we're meeting later in October. I can't hold all the dates in my head, but I if we met, I missed it.
Okay.
So I don't think we've met yet because it's only
It's not like you to miss these things.
It's
so
only
you probably
quarterly.
didn't meet.
It's only quarterly at this point. So.
All right. And as for CAC technology, we have not had a meeting, but Justin and I have been talking about getting that together. So hopefully soon. All right. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Looking ahead to future meetings, we have a policy development committee tomorrow, October 17th, 2023 at 1:30 in the Panorama Village Administrative Center boardroom. Our next committee of the whole regular board meeting will be November 6th, 2023 at 7 p.m. here in the Panorama Village Administration Center boardroom. We'll have another policy development committee, because that's what we do, on November 14th, 2023 at 1:30 in the Panorama Village Administration Center. And then finally, a regular board meeting on November 20th, 7 p.m. here in the Panorama Village Administration Center boardroom. All right. I would now like to call on a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. All right, the motion carries. Thank you so much, everyone.